En este video, un Gatorade y una mujer conversan en cuanto a los niños que se autoperciben como niñas y si deben someterse a cambios radicales que pueden alterar su vida a largo plazo. También te darás cuenta cómo el señor, con labios pintados de rosa que quiere besarte, repetirá muchas veces la frase "me encanta lo que has dicho". Mira el video completo y dime qué opinas de esa frase.
Should children under the age of 18 be legally allowed to transition with medical interventions such as puberty blockers, hormone therapy, or even surgery like removing healthy breasts of girls? And are children capable of making this kind of life-altering decision?
Wow. So first of all, that's a spectacular question. And I think that there's so many nuances within the question that it's a question that I can't say yes or no to, because in my opinion, it is actually circumstantial, right? So maybe if I was able to break down the question into maybe a more specified kind of topic. So like, for example, let's talk about puberty blockers, right? Could that be something that is used in kind of the medical field to give gender affirming care to? Well, we have the studies, right? We say that, we see kind of, a fairly 90% kind of effective in not necessarily curing the depression, but an improved sense of self when a child with kind of gender dysphoria is given gender affirming care. That seems to be fairly good. We have people like the American, Psychiatric Association, Trevor Project that are all saying it tends to work fairly well. We've used puberty blockers for precocious puberty for decades before. We don't know all of the long-term effects yet. That's fair. But this is one of those times where I tend to go with the specialists, the endocrinologists, the child psychologists, and it seems like that would be a fair kind of intervention method. But I'm of course willing to hear other perspectives.
I would say, unfortunately, a lot of those institutions and the people in those institutions are captured by a particular ideology that really sacrifices the well-being of kids. So my answer to that question would be unequivocally no. Before the age of 18, your frontal lobe isn't developed. Your frontal lobe isn't developed until you're 25 years old. And that is very important for understanding the long-term consequences of your actions. So if you're thinking about puberty blockers 10, 11, 12 years old, you certainly do not have the ability yet to understand the long-term consequences of what you're putting your body through. Not only your body, but also your mind actually requires puberty to be healthy. So to grow up, for maturation, not just physically, but also mentally, you need puberty. To be fertile later on in life, you need puberty. And so boys in particular who go through puberty blockers and they stop that natural process of puberty, they are especially risking their future fertility. And of course, typically this leads to cross-sex hormones, which is chemical castration. And so you're talking about, in many cases, irreversible procedures and processes that kids cannot consent to because they do not have the mental ability to understand the long-term repercussions.
I love everything you just said. And first of all, I appreciate when you talk that I could tell that you care for what the welfare of the children are, right? So I first of all appreciate that perspective. I do, in my personal opinion, get worried because I have my master's of science in education from Johns Hopkins with a focus in neurodiversity, right? And I see a lot of statistics like this get thrown around and they're very out of context, right? That idea of like, well, the frontal lobe is not developed until you're 25. Due to neuroplasticity, your frontal lobe is not fully developed ever. Right? And if we said, you can't make decisions until you're 25 because your frontal lobe is not developed, we wouldn't hold people accountable since the age of 18 for doing random crimes. We still put people in juvenile detention facilities. We don't say, your frontal lobe isn't developed, so you can't make that decision yet, right? We hold people can drive at 16, right? We don't say, your frontal lobe is not developed, you're not able to actually operate a car. No, we let people get into a car at 15 and a half, right? And that puts people like a ton at risk, right? So I just see a lot of these statistics being like, the frontal lobe is not developed until 25. One, not true. Two, that's not necessarily scientifically relevant when it comes to neuroplasticity or neuroscience. Furthermore, that idea of like, chemical castration, completely different, right? Also, I again appreciate that you're kind of going towards that idea of like, it's about fertility and it's about making not everyone's focus is fertility. And like, you were saying, as somebody who's conservative, Catholic, I so appreciate that.
Not Catholic. I just want to clarify that. That's okay.
I'm so sorry. I sincerely apologize.
No, that's okay.
So my family, I was going to say, is Catholic, right? Desmond Dela Cruz Fambrini of the Cross. So I completely understand that focus in fertility. And again, I apologize, but maybe that's not everyone's everyone's focus. Like maybe some people's focus, I would love to hear your thoughts though.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving that perspective. And I love to know your background and how much you know about neuroplasticity and things like that. And so obviously it's true that we allow young people to make some decisions. Now, I would be for conversations about kids getting their driver's licenses later, or raising the age of when kids enlist in the military, 18 years old. But that to me doesn't justify allowing them to make these kinds of decisions that will have long-term repercussions. It's not the same thing as allowing a young person to drive a car. Of course, there are decisions that we allow young people to make. It's not like we treat them like children. As you said, we do hold them liable for some crimes that they commit. But when we are talking about altering and stopping a natural and necessary process for the human body, like puberty, when we are talking about injecting a young person's body with hormones that are not naturally created by their body, we are talking about, again, long-term, lifelong repercussions. Yes, possibly fertility, but also the for example, like the decay of the uterus when you have too much testosterone in your body as a woman, all different kinds of physical maladies that come with trying to change your body into what it can never be. I just don't think that young people who so often have other mental health diagnoses really have the ability to make those decisions. I've talked to, and maybe you have too, so many detransitioners who at the time that they transitioned or tried to transition when they were a teenager or maybe even 19 years old, they got the double mastectomy, they went on the testosterone, they thought for sure at that point that they will never, ever, ever want kids. No, I don't want to be a mom. Right. I'm a man. And then not only did they detransition and realize, oh, I want to be a mom, they realized, oh, I really want to breastfeed. Now I can't do that. And unfortunately, the adults in their life had the same mentality that kind of you just expressed, that, well, if you can drive a car, you can decide to cut your healthy breasts off. And now they're living forever with that guilt. I think we can do better as adults to help guide kids in a better direction.
Can I actually respond to that? Because I love that idea. So how would you consider kids cannot make that decision on their own, but with people they can? Because that's what I think. I don't think a kid should be able to wake up and call me controversial. And actually, multiple people in my community don't like me for this, right? But if somebody at 16 is depressed, diagnosed with depressive, and they go, I want to transition, and I don't want the double mastectomy, I don't think they should be able to get that immediately. I think there should be, just like the American Psychological Association says, significant screening. You need a doctor's opinion, parent surveys, significant amounts of therapy, hormone blockers to extend the amount of time that could actually be, where this can be considered. And then once every box is checked, to make something that drastic, because you're talking about a drastic decisions that, in all fairness, and I hope this doesn't come off as tongue in cheek, you talk about are lifelong effects. Statistically, most of the lifelong effects tend to be positive, statistically, right? Like you say, like, oh, well, I've talked to so many detransitioners. Literally, knee surgery. We have higher rate of regret for knee surgery than we do, gender affirming care, right? Hair gender affirming care actually has without exaggeration, 100% approval rate in the trans community, right? We can look that up on something like Alexa even. But with that said, right, how do you feel about people coming together to make these decisions, just like we do when a child needs some other type of support, whether it be a physical disability, learning disability? We come together as a community, medical community, educational community, vital, parent, come together and we make that decision like as a team. How would we, does it have to be an unequivocal no? Can it be no in some and yes in others?
Unequivocally, no. Unequivocally, no, okay. Because there are, of course, things that even if you had the consent of a child and you had everyone saying, yes, absolutely, let's cut this child's legs off because they identify as someone without legs, we could still say from an outside perspective, you know what? No, that's going to be wrong. That's going to be harmful for that person. It doesn't matter if everyone and their mom says that it's okay. Everyone with a white coat is saying, yes, that's great. Someone from an outside perspective, even without those credentials, can say it's not right to cut someone's healthy legs off because we don't like the consequences and the repercussions of that. And so that's what I would say there. And I also just wanted to clarify something. You talk about the rates of regret. One, I don't actually think that we have very good data on that. We don't have very good statistics or reliable information on just how much regret is out there. Plus, it's really hard to be a detransitioner that speaks out because you get a whole lot of hate from the community that you were once a part of. And so I don't think that we have good, reliable information on that. But I am not basing my disapproval of and disagreement with transition on the rates of regret or not. I think it is objectively, morally, ethically wrong to mutilate your body, in particular as a child, whether or not they want it, think it's great, think it's awesome for the rest of their life. I am never going to be for the blocking of the puberty of or the chemical castration of a young person.
El concepto de plasticidad cerebral se refiere a la capacidad del cerebro para cambiar y adaptarse a lo largo de la vida en respuesta a la experiencia, el aprendizaje y las lesiones inclusive. Sin embargo, el desarrollo y maduración de ciertas áreas del cerebro, particularmente la corteza prefrontal, siguen un curso específico durante la infancia, adolescencia y juventud temprana. Aunque la plasticidad cerebral permite cambios y adaptaciones en el cerebro a lo largo de la vida, el desarrollo estructural y funcional de ciertas áreas cerebrales sigue un cronograma relativamente fijo. La corteza prefrontal, que está involucrada en funciones ejecutivas como el control de impulsos y la toma de decisiones, continúa madurando y refinándose hasta bien entrada la segunda década de vida. Durante la adolescencia y la juventud, el cerebro pasa por una poda sináptica, donde se eliminan algunas conexiones neuronales y se fortalecen otras. Este proceso ayuda a mejorar la eficiencia y la precisión de las redes neuronales, lo cual es parte del desarrollo estructural del cerebro que ocurre hasta los 25 años. La plasticidad cerebral no termina con la maduración completa de la corteza prefrontal. Los adultos continúan siendo capaces de aprender, adaptarse y cambiar sus patrones de comportamiento a lo largo de la vida. Sin embargo, la estructura básica y la eficiencia de las funciones ejecutivas se establecen durante la juventud. Es decir, por ejemplo, como te mencionaba, el control de impulsos y la toma de decisiones. Así que lo que dijo el señor de labios pintados, que te gustan, no es del todo cierto. Por otra parte, acerca del estudio en mención, acerca de que son más felices, pues lamentamos informar que no hay suficientes estudios a largo plazo sobre las consecuencias de las intervenciones de este tipo en niños. Se necesitan más investigaciones exhaustivas y de seguimiento prolongado para evaluar los efectos a largo plazo. Por ejemplo, algunos estudios realizados por el Centro Nacional para la Información Biotecnológica de Estados Unidos demuestran que las personas que se sometieron a estos tratamientos tienen un riesgo de intento de dejar este mundo, ya sabes a qué me refiero, que es 12,12 veces mayor que las personas que no lo hicieron. Así que, ¿cuáles son los supuestos beneficios a largo plazo si existe una mayor tendencia a irse antes de tiempo de este mundo? No tiene sentido. Y aquí culmina este video. Si te gustó, dale like, comenta el video y compártelo. Asimismo, si te gusta este tipo de contenido, suscríbete a mi canal. Gracias, hasta luego.